Good day, this is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you from Kalamata, Greece on August 16th, 2024. About 2 weeks ago, I launched a new series of interviews entitled Women of the Resistance. My purpose in launching this initiative was basically twofold. First, I wanted to challenge the profoundly misleading stereotypes that we in the West have been fed for decades about the groups and the individuals who are opposed to Western hegemony in West Asia. And secondly, I wanted to highlight the amazing contributions of women to this movement because they have been hidden from us for far too long. In my first interview, I spoke with Lebanese journalist Marwa Osman. You can find that interview on my YouTube channel entitled Reason to Resist. And in this interview, my second installment of this series, I'm going to speak with someone who has been a dear friend of mine for almost a decade now, Palestinian-Canadian artist Rehab Nazzal. Rehab is undoubtedly one of the most courageous people I have ever had the privilege to know, and she certainly is also one of the most principled. So with no further ado, here is my discussion today with Rehab. So Rehab, as I let you know before we began our discussion today, this is the second installment of a new series of interviews I'm doing entitled Women of the Resistance. There was no question in my mind that I had to interview you for this series because of your extraordinary background. And I'd like to begin by asking you to tell us a little bit about your background. Where do you and your family come from? Where did you grow up? And how did you become an artist whose work focuses on the Palestinian struggle?
Wow, that's a big question. But for your channel about women in resistance, you need many channels. You need every Palestinian woman in your channel, especially the resilient women in Gaza now. I was born here. Actually, I am now in Jenin, where I was born, where I went to school. And I finished high school in Jenin, school for girls. It was just a high school, over 400 girls. And there, our activism started against the occupation in the late 70s. The Israelis, at the time, they stationed soldiers on the roof of the building across our school. They come before we arrive at school, they come and they lie down on the roof and point their guns on us all the time. So if there is a protest or something, they fire tear gas, including in the classrooms. So that's from the very beginning, our life. So activism, actually, it wasn't like a choice, something that you choose, it's your life. That's how it started in the school. After I finished high school, I received a scholarship from Damascus University. When I finished my studies, I wasn't allowed to return back. And this is the case for, I would say, tens of thousands or even more of Palestinian students who went to study abroad and they weren't allowed by the Israelis. Or over 25 years, I remained outside Palestine. First in Jordan, I worked in Jordan, but the Jordanian regime was after me as well. They held my passport, prevented me from traveling, from working in any public sector. I worked in private sectors. They reached to the private sector and expelled me. I worked with, at the time, the affairs for prisoners and martyrs in Jordan. This is an organization linked to the PLO to help injured and martyrs and their families. After that, we immigrated to Canada. I had 2 babies at the time. The Jordanian regime expelled my 2 babies. They gave them an expulsion. They were 2 and 3 years old. My lovely daughter, she was 3 years old. I have to photograph her as a baby and her brother, and they gave us an expulsion document, which I have. to this minute. So we immigrated to Canada.
Mhm.
And it was like taking us, it's like you take a fish out of the sea, really, out of the water. It wasn't something we wanted, I wanted. It's not that only you feel yourself estranged, but you're far from your home, from your family, from your people. Also, you are there as if it's an extension to the Israeli occupation. That was my first encounter. I have to defend myself as an occupied, as a colonized in that country. I can't forget how being a Palestinian, and I'm talking early 90s, just to say a Palestinian, you will get attacked. Just to say you are Palestinian.
In Canada, you're referring to.
I was in Canada, yes, absolutely. In Canada, we talk about anti-Palestinian racism now. It was horrific then. Now it's, at least it's known. You have a Zionist teacher who would suppress my son in school, censor his work. Even 2 teachers collaborated in changing my son's work, prevented him from being with the group. It's horrific. I mean, it's like fight after another with the board, the school board, with the teachers, with the principals, just going back and forth. My daughter, in a course called World Politics, she presented the house demolishing in Palestine as a collective punishment of Palestinians. The principal of Lisgar School in Ottawa wanted to expel her because there was the daughter of Tenenbaum in her class who started crying and went to the principal that she was offended and they are donors to the school. These are really glimpses. I have so much to say about my life in Canada. And my kids were transparent with me. They will come and tell me. Like a student in grade 5 will tell my son, there is no Palestine. He would bring him the map and say, there is no Palestine, prove it. I would go to the school, speak to the teacher, speak to the mother of the child who tells me my father is Zionist and he is educating my son, but you are the mom. Anyways, so that's my life. I used to paint and draw, believe it or not, and sell my work and have a studio, spend hours and hours in it. My kids they will experiment with me. It was lovely until 2005, when I returned to Palestine with a visa, 1-month visa. When I entered, in my way out, just came to my mind at the borders. I told the Israelis, you took my ID document, Hawiye, it's called, and I want it back. To make it short, I managed to get it back from the Israelis. The next year, I brought my children and I got them into my ID documents, and each of them now is a Palestinian.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So since then, since 2005, the shock I had when I saw the country, there weren't any of these colonies on the hilltops when I left in the 80s, especially in the Jenin and Nablus area. When I went back and I was just walking, and my first project was called Walking Under Occupation. I was walking in the refugee camps, cities, villages, crossing checkpoints. And it was just around the end of the Second Intifada. The country was destroyed, the roads, it was horrific. So I realized, why am I painting? Why am I drawing? I mean, documentary media, documenting what's there for future generations, that's a responsibility. And to confront the Zionist narrative that denies my existence, requires I use the documentary media, which includes photography, video, and sound as well, installation, publishing, all means. And of course, some of my work is really conceptual, like we take just an idea and materialize it in photography or video.
Mhm.
And since then, the attack began targeting my art. In 2007, my first Walking Under Occupation exhibition in Ottawa, it was attacked by the Israelis, although the Ottawa Citizen, there was an art critic who came and he actually wrote about it one full page, which was surprising for me. Yeah, titled Walking Under Occupation. It's photography and sound, and it is about crossing the checkpoints in Nablus, at Hawara, the people, the struggle, the suffering, the soldiers just tormenting the people at checkpoints, and of course the watchtowers and others. From 2010 to 2020, every time I go to Palestine, in the streets, on the roads, while I'm driving, while I'm being driven, I set my camera to capture all the watchtowers in the West Bank. So far, I have 87 of these watchtowers within the tiny West Bank, within, because I gave a lecture at Concordia University. Some Israeli students said these are between Gaza and Israel, between the West Bank and Israel, to protect us, but they are all in the Palestinian community. So, and I published the book called Driving in Palestine in just 2023. It's all about restrictions of movement, fragmenting of the Palestinian land, fragmenting of the Palestinian people. It's such a system or systems they imposed, the Israelis, between coded colors cars, between only Israeli roads. Of course, the colonies, you never know what's behind these walls, where the colonies are, or on hilltops, you don't know. These are restricted, and they are themselves, these built as military bases. They have purpose before being for civilians.
I'd like to
So
talk
I'll continue.
I'd like to talk about the military situation currently and its relevance to your own personal experience. Something you didn't mention in that fascinating account. And you did a wonderful job, I thought, of covering so much history in your own life quite succinctly. Thank you for that. But there's a part that you didn't mention. And before I bring it up, I want to relate it to what is currently happening in West Asia. As I'm sure you know, on July 31st, the Israelis assassinated the top Hezbollah military commander, Fuad Shukur, in Beirut, knowing full well that this was going to be viewed as crossing a red line by Hezbollah. And then on the same day, the political leader of Hamas was murdered in Tehran. And although Israel took credit for the killing of Shukur, it didn't say explicitly that it killed Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, but it's widely believed that he did, and they did, and certainly they haven't denied it, and it's consistent with their prior behavior. And that too was the crossing of a red line, and the Israelis knew that that was going to be viewed as such. Now, in your own life, you experienced this in a very personal way when on June 9th, 1986, Mossad agents shot dead your brother, Khaled Nazzal, on the streets of Athens, Greece. And this was not only an unlawful extrajudicial assassination, it was also a violation of the sovereignty of the country where I'm currently situated and of which I am a citizen. Your brother, I understand, was the Central Committee Secretary of the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine and a leader of the PLO. The first question I want to ask you about this is, how did that, I mean, obviously it was a tremendous loss to you and your family. How did the killing of your brother influence your own work and the direction that your life took subsequently? How would you assess that impact?
You know, Dimitri, I met my brother at the age of 18, my brother Khaled. My brother Khaled was a student when Israel occupied the West Bank and Gaza in 1967, and we couldn't see him, he couldn't return back. And he joined the revolution. So he was, in our imagination, the fidai, the fighter, the resilient. So I met with him after I finished high school. And imagine yourself meet your brother at that age. And he was exceptional. Exceptional at all levels. As a man, how he deals with women, his beliefs, his action with his wife, with his baby daughter, his life, how simple is that life was. So I got to know him for 4 years while I was studying in Damascus. And then I left and he was assassinated. The feeling I got, as if I was shot in my heart with one of the bullets that riddled his head, that my mom and his wife couldn't see his face because they emptied their weapons in his head. I've never looked at the Palestinian struggle as personal, I would say, because Israel in assassination is a master. I can't find the term even to describe. Since 1948, when Folke Bernadette, the Swedish UN ambassador, tried to resolve the refugees issue, Israel assassinated him. In the 1970s, an artist in Italy, Akram Zaatri, they assassinated him holding a book. He was translated. The bullet went through the book into his heart. So artists, intellectuals, leaders, diplomats across Europe and the Arab world, because Lebanon was a place for assassination, particularly in the 1980s. It affected us so much, the family, the loss of Khaled. He was the oldest for my mom, and she lived with him only 18 years, and she would see him every few years when the Israelis give her a permit to travel, give her a few days. So it was hard, and as if every year in his anniversary, as if it happens yesterday. That's how I feel. But within the larger context, Israel targeted in the 1980s a great number of exceptional Palestinians who are leftists from all factions, including Fatah. And when you ask me how that influenced my artwork, in 2012, I began a research about Israel's assassinations of Palestinians, and I managed to get 128 of these individuals who were murdered in ways you can't think about, even sending a package of chocolate to someone that explodes. In a phone in Paris, they implanted explosive. In a bed, another explosive. Just the ways how they infiltrated these European countries with full impunity. I can't get over it. And I'm talking about 2012. 128, I made a short video, 4 minutes, called Target. And that's when, in 2014, when I exhibited the Israeli ambassador to Canada, He was offended that I showed the work, not offended because his government practices extrajudicial assassinations in sovereign countries across the world. Offended that I show the work, and it's really conceptual without so many context. It's just the year of assassination, very little information, the year and the place and the photograph, and all of them create a mask as representing the memory of the Palestinian people, the collective memory. That was 4 minutes. And in the beside that work, there was a huge work. It's 2,000 photographs that I captured from a footage of torture of the Palestinian prisoners in the Nakab prison. So he did not see anything. He saw Abu Iyad and Dalal Mughrabi, and that's what he spoke. And the conservative government at the time, including Pierre Poilievre in the parliament, attacked the exhibition, believe it or not.
The one who's slated likely going to be the next prime minister of Canada.
I know. How shameful.
Pathetic.
They tried to pressure the mayor of Ottawa to shut down the exhibition, but they failed, and it fired back. Linda Fromm and many of these conservatives.
The mother of David Fromm, the former speechwriter of George W. Bush, promoted the criminal war of aggression on Iraq. Yes, that Fromm.
And the lead now for the project of Stephen Harper Sanctuary, Bird Sanctuary in North Palestine. She is leading the project, collecting donations to build for Stephen Harper. It's already built, but they are completing it. Bird Sanctuary for tweeting from Palestine. So yes, it affected me, absolutely, the assassination, but I always look at my brother with a context. Now, the assassination, if you want to jump to now.
I do. I want to know what you think, based on historical experience, the result of these assassinations is going to be.
Unimaginable. I am unable even to describe. I call assassination drones, I call them now, and like distinguish them from surveillance drones, because those and the drones that explode, they are themselves explosive. So 3 types: one that drops missiles, one that just surveils to collect surveillance footage and information, and one that explodes. This is practiced here in Palestine, in Gaza, but recently it's increasing in the West Bank tremendously. However, to go back before I speak about the situation here, what happened to Ismail Haniyeh, which the Palestinians in the street, they make fun of the Israelis. Like, okay, you killed Haniyeh, you have Sinwar now. You should have protected Haniyeh. You cry now. You should have protected Haniyeh instead of having
have a more
Sinwar.
militant leader.
Yeah, exactly.
I thought it was remarkable, actually, Rehab. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I thought it was a very powerful message to the Israelis that they chose Sinwar, who's leading the battles in Gaza that have inflicted so much damage on the Israeli military, despite the incredible disparity of military weaponry that Israel enjoys, the advantages. What more powerful a message could you have sent to the Israelis than replacing Ismail Haniyeh with Sinwar? Sorry, please. So
no, I agree with you. And it's a democratic process, by the way, because the street here in the West Bank, we're expecting another 2 people, Mish'al and another one. That's what people were expecting. And we also were surprised that they elected, and I say it, it's a democratic process.
The members of, you mean the members of Hamas, the actual members?
Hamas.
Yeah.
Yeah, the political wing and the military wing, they agreed on Sinwar.
So the key question here, I think, is, in theory, the Israelis have been engaged in this decades-long killing spree of resistance leaders because they think that it's going to help them to weaken the resistance and defeat the resistance. Do you think that's going to be the outcome? Do you think there's any prospect of that being the outcome of the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh, that they're going to weaken the resistance to the point that they will prevail over it?
Well, 76 years of experience answers this. It's not really today or this year. The massacres, one after another, from Sabra and Shatila, 1967, the multiple genocidal attacks on Gaza, the massacres of Nablus, the massacre of Jenin. The generations now who are fighting, especially here in the West Bank, the fighters, they were born in 2020, like they're young. They were born just, they're babies. And they are more fierce even than their parents. And I speak to many of the people who I encounter, why do you join? They say, well, they killed my brother, they killed my father, they killed my cousin, they killed my friend. So no, this is actually strengthening the resistance, this policy of assassination. But on the other hand, violating the sovereignty of these countries, especially now, Iran and Lebanon always has been violated. Europe, which I hope one day they will be held accountable for all these assassinations, including of my brother. Why they were complicit? Why Canada printed passports to Mossad agents to assassinate Palestinians in different parts of the world? My brother Khaled told me, he came to visit me before his assassination, and he escaped an assassination attempt in Berlin. There is not just violation of the sovereignty of these countries and their lands, but complicity. They're helping them, they're silent. Like, remember in Dubai when they assassinated Mabhouh? 23 were involved with Western passports, and no one has done anything. Although this is 2010, it's recent. But this is the assassination of Haniyeh. It's not just they're targeting the Palestinian resistance movement, but also Tehran. They're invoking, I would say, Tehran, because Netanyahu, that's how we feel. He wanted a war with Iran. He wanted to bring the West and especially the US to destroy Iran. That's before October, really, before. So we don't want a regional war, the Palestinians, really. We don't. If you ask the people in the street, we don't.
And one is not necessary to bring this to an end. All that would have to happen is the US would have to stop sending weapons to Israel, and the Palestinian people would be free. I think it's as simple as that. All indications are, I agree completely, Rehab, that Netanyahu wants this war. And personally, I believe that the actual decision makers in the US government, whoever they may be, and whatever they may be saying publicly, probably want a pretext for destroying Iran as well. Because this is not just about Israeli hegemony, it's also about US hegemony over the people and the resources of West Asia. But I would like to talk to you now about your own experience with Israeli bullets, because you too have been on the receiving end of them. As you and I have discussed previously in a prior interview, in 2015, you were shot by an Israeli sniper while you were in Bethlehem, photographing skunk trucks, Israeli vehicles that were pouring noxious fluids onto the homes of Palestinians. And when a Palestinian ambulance came to your aid, the Israelis rained tear gas down upon it, obviously trying to impede the medical treatment that you ultimately received. This was clearly a war crime. Why do you think this was done to you? And how did that affect your work since then in the decade or so that has transpired since then?
How it affects me, and this is really, these days, I think about it sometimes. I think with that bullet, I lost any sense of fear from the Israelis. Trust me, in Jenin, I was there when they invaded during the day. Rarely they invade during the day. And the shooting began all around us, and I'm holding my camera in their face. The jeeps, the military vehicles circulating, and the bullets everywhere, even the journalists, reporters on the ground. And I am standing there with my camera. They stopped, looked at me, maybe photographed me through the, but I lost fear. I'm not afraid at all. So this is one effect. At the beginning, of course, I was in a shock. I was. It's like that sense, if the bullet was higher, like what happened 3 weeks earlier to one who I know, 29 years old, Mu'taz, I'll be dead. So it's like you escaped. But what hurts me, Dimitri, and that's, by the way, I have to mention that you and I, we met during that encounter in 2015 when you called me and when you offered to be my lawyer, pro bono at the time. And I appreciated that so much. But also I told you, we are 16,000 injured in 2015. We were in 63 locations in the West Bank. So, and no previous experience that we know of prosecuting any Israeli soldiers for killing anyone, any Palestinian here or Palestinian with hybrid identity. So yes, that's when we met at the time. What hurts me a lot is the Canadian government. Do you remember the Iranian woman who actually, I met some Iranian women in a film festival recently, and I asked them about Massa, who was killed, that the Canadian Prime Minister and all the hula bula, all the streets speaking about her. She said she even has some like mental issues. It's not like it's presented in the news.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless, it's a life lost. But all this, Shireen Abu Akleh, when she was killed, known to the world as a journalist, as a reporter, and she's also American Palestinian.
And from a major media organization, Al Jazeera.
Exactly. And nothing by the Canadian government or any politician. It's just some shy statements. Better if they stayed silent. Yeah. And when I was shot, I am a Canadian citizen, for God's sake. Nothing, absolutely nothing. No condemnation. All I get a call from some worker in the embassy, if you need help. Help what? I said. Anyways, the assassination, if I go back here in the West Bank, I'm living with it these days. In the last 10 days, Israel assassinated 4 young men in Jenin. Right after they were killed, I went to the location. Their bodies were shredded. They were collecting their flesh from olive trees, part of their skulls in the hands of a guy I photographed. They were standing there, not armed. It's not in Jenin refugee camp, it's in the city of Jenin. Those 4. Then, not yesterday, the other day, in a village near to Bas, which is here 20 kilometers away, they killed 4, also with a drone. And I went to Tubas to see 2 cars that were targeted by drones. One of them, a person was inside it. He escaped it. It's a miracle. 3 missiles. And I put a photograph on Instagram of his car. So they're after the Palestinians with this killing technology, killing machines, sitting in their offices and hitting bottoms, killing us. And of course, every Palestinian here tells you that we can't compare to Gaza. Our losses is incomparable. Like in the village of Walaji beside Bethlehem, 20 houses they destroyed within 1 month. I was there photographing, just they come, soldiers and bulldozer, and they destroyed your house. You spent 30 years saving to build it, and they destroy it in front of you. Gaza, I mean, the news yesterday was, it was nothing new for us, the Palestinians. The media was circulating that the number of Palestinians who were murdered reached 40,000, but it's incorrect, of course.
Oh, it passed that number long ago, for sure, for sure.
Not just that, the unknown. I personally know people who, their relatives under the rubble, there is no records. These numbers, probably those who registered in the hospital. The destruction of 90% of housing.
Mhm.
I have no word to say other than this is an American base. We are living in Palestine that the Americans not converting it. It is for them and for Western powers, some Western powers, Britain and France and Germany. It is a military base. Negotiation in between, I doubt the Fatah is serious about it. I doubt.
You mean the unity, the negotiations?
Yeah, the unity.
Mhm.
The unity, because there is not a single sign that they are serious about it. Just 2 days ago, they're cleaning the explosive that the fighters handmade create to protect their refugee camps and their cities from the Israelis. They look for it and detonate it.
You're talking about for
so,
these IEDs, these improvised explosive devices that are by the resistance for these.
that the fighters make it because there is a sense of near the end, the horrors, the genocide in Gaza, and there will be rebuilding and there will be a new leadership. So he's preparing himself to lead also Gaza as a PA. That's what the people say, I'll tell you.
Right.
But on the ground, yeah, I mean, everyone is ready for unity, everyone on the ground.
So lastly, Rehab, before we close out our discussion, I'd like to talk to you about this wonderful, extraordinary film that you have shot, created. I think you've played every single role that needs to be played in terms of the creation of this particular film, if I'm not mistaken. You did the camera work, you know, the production and so forth, and the conception, the creation in all aspects. And it's called Vibrations.
The idea of the film came in 2021 when I went to Gaza after Israel attacked Gaza for 8 days and destroyed all these towers, including the media towers, if you remember. And I went 1 week after to work with children in an art therapy program. The children were traumatized everywhere, community centers, schools. I worked with 51 children, and I will never, ever forget working with the children in Rantisi Hospital who are sick with cancer and cannot get treatment, cannot travel to the West Bank, or those with kidney failure in all the floors. This hospital is gone, was targeted by Israel. What happened to the patients is a question. The answer remains unknown. So when I went back to Canada, because I worked with deaf children in Atfaluna Center for Deaf Children, Atfaluna Society. It's a school, it's a center that is created just for the deaf community in Gaza, and it's exceptional. It's amazing. It has workshops, create products that is exceptionally beautiful and very well done. Anyhow, those kids, the work I've done with them affected me so much that I returned in 2022 just to make a film with them. And I filmed them. Amani you're talking about is one 10 years old girl from Atfaluna Society. She's the only one deaf in her family. And I met many people who there is no genes like genetics. It's just unknown. Some used to hear when they were babies, but they don't. Later on lost their hearing. So the film questions two things: the deafness of the world toward the siege, 16 years siege of Gaza, because I went and I saw Gaza is forgotten. It's a concentration camp. People are dying and no one is paying attention, including the PA even. So I wanted to raise a question about this deafness by bringing like even information and the perspective of the deaf children. So using the body language only, the sign language, to communicate with the world. Why you're deaf, basically, the question. And also to question if the deafness of these children is natural or by all these weapons, including sonic weapons, the sonic boom that many women lose their babies from, how powerful. Is it the reason for losing their hearing? So several layers it has, and how I use the sound with the sign language, how I put the drones across the film, just to give the people a sense of what it means to live for 16 years at the time, but now it's 18 years, just around the hour under the noise of the drone. So those beautiful children, like any children in the world, they're playing, they're lovely, they're smart, they love life, they make art like any kid anywhere. Amani is one of them. Brilliant, brilliant girl. She wants to be a journalist when she grows up. So I got in touch with her father in November, and then I lost touch with him until February. And I thought they're gone because he told me, we're staying in the north, we're not leaving. Our house and neighborhood is gone, entirely destroyed. We moved to a UN school, etc. And until February, I heard back from him that they survived. They were displaced several times in schools, UN schools, then in tents. He sent me photographs making tents over the rubble. It seems it became safer than UN schools after targeting the school. So just 3 days ago, he sent me footage and still photographs. I shared some on social media. The father told me he lost members of his family. When I met with them, there was his wife and his mom living with them. But all I see in the frame of the photographs and the video is just he and his 3 kids, Amani and her younger siblings. So that's Amani. The other individuals in the film, especially Musa and his brother, I've been begging for news from all the people I know in Gaza to try to get me some news from them. And other kids, I was hoping to go to Gaza during the break, the March break, because I teach usually during the year. So Rafah crossing is closed, I couldn't. Now I'm communicating with the photographer to try to locate them without jeopardizing his safety. That's another aspect. I don't want anyone to be in harm, put himself or herself in a position like in danger to get a footage for me. No. If in the next few days, if there is a ceasefire, I'll go. Yeah.
And lastly, Rahab, how can people watch this wonderful film?
The film is being screened in many festivals across the world. In Geneva, there is one coming. In DC, there is one coming. In Quebec, it just got an award a couple of weeks ago as the best short documentary in Quebec. It won several awards so far from Iran International short documentary competition. It's not this my issue. Anyone who reaches to me, festivals, community centers, activists, I respond immediately. I have to mention something. You mentioned at the beginning, the film, I didn't make it on my own alone, although it was funded by Ontario Art Council. I have photographers who help me. I have editors who help me, including Rana Nazzal Hamadi and Sireen Ahmad. I have two brilliant photographers who also helped there. So it's a team, it's a work of team.
It is always a great pleasure to speak to you, my friend, and please, please, please remain safe. I know you are fearless. I've seen it with my own eyes, but a little fear isn't a bad thing because it can protect you. So with that, I wish you safeness and health, and hopefully we'll speak in person very soon.
Thank you.